Super Lucky Disaster Man. Chapter 94, Extra, Whitewashing Phase, The Walking Shinigami. As an undercover agent, Dazai Osamu had his own mission, so he didn't stay long before leaving behind Kudo Shinichi and Komaeda Nagito. Before leaving, Dazai Osamu thoughtfully gave Kudo Shinichi some advice: don't go home for now, and try not to let too many people know about the situation. But you should still tell your parents a little. Hearing this, Kudo Shinichi couldn't help but think deeply. Although Dazai Osamu didn't want to say more, he did mention that it was an international crime organization. At the time of the case, the two men in black were also there, and they knew his name. He wasn't an anonymous person, so they could very well be interested enough to check his background. If they found out that someone who was supposed to be dead was actually alive, something that was originally nothing could easily become something. Kudo Shinichi could barely protect himself, so he naturally didn't want to implicate Rang. After thinking for a moment, he asked Komaeda Nagito to call Mori Rang again, telling her that he had to go abroad temporarily due to urgent matters, and that someone would later handle the school leave procedures for him. Komaeda Nagito didn't refuse, but he did ask curiously, "Aren't you going to call Yukiko-ne-san as well?" Yes, Komaeda Nagito referred to Kudo Shinichi's mother as Yukiko-ne-san, something Kudo Yukiko herself requested. Since Kudo Shinichi didn't have many friends, Kudo's parents had exchanged contact information with Komaeda Nagito. "For now, let's not worry my parents," Kudo Shinichi said optimistically. Perhaps this will be resolved soon. Although he had some reservations about Dazai Osamu, he trusted the abilities of the infamous former port mafia executive. Moreover, from what Edogawa Ranpo said, Kudo Shinichi felt that, for Dazai Osamu, this was probably a small matter. Komaeda Nagito thought the same, so he didn't argue further and called Mori Rang as Kudo Shinichi requested. Mori Rang was not willing to accept this explanation. "But why can't Shinichi tell me himself? I ran into him on the street. His phone had run out of battery, so he asked me to let you know. He should be on the plane by now." Komaeda Nagito followed the script and explained, "He'll probably contact you later." Mori Rang. Although it sounded quite coincidental, considering Komaeda-senpai's luck, Mori Rang couldn't find any point to argue with. It seemed like anything could happen to her senpai. After settling things with Mori Rang, who had been left halfway through her date, Kudo Shinichi let out a sigh of relief. While Komaeda Nagito was making the call, Kudo Shinichi was lost in thought. Once Komaeda Nagito hung up, Kudo Shinichi spoke seriously. "Senpai." Kudo Shinichi asked earnestly, "Can I stay at your place?" His parents had already moved to America. Although his neighbor, Professor Agasa, had practically watched him grow up and was very close to him, the more Kudo Shinichi thought about it, the more he felt it was better to involve as few people as possible. Since Komaeda-senpai already knew, he decided to shamelessly impose on Komaeda-senpai a bit more. Komaeda Nagito had no objections. After all, back when he was struggling to find a place to stay in Tokyo, he had stayed at Kudo Shinichi's house, so now was just the right time to return the favor. The previous place had been blown up by Mimic, and now there was a new one, with plenty of empty rooms. Having one more person like Kudo Shinichi around wouldn't make much difference. Getting Komaeda Nagito's permission, Kudo Shinichi sighed in relief, but he then felt a bit guilty. He wasn't lacking in EQ, and he understood that Dazai Osamu's advice before leaving was essentially to tell him to leave quickly, not to burden Komaeda-senpai. Previously, Dazai Osamu already didn't like him, and Kudo Shinichi believed he could fully understand Dazai Osamu's intentions, but after much thought, he still made this decision. He could only hope that by the next time Dazai Osamu arrived, everything would be resolved, allowing him to return home without facing Dazai Osamu's glare. However, there was now a new problem. If I have to call Rang, wouldn't she immediately notice my voice? This problem was once again handled by Komaeda Nagito, who found Professor Agasa, Kudo Shinichi's neighbor, and asked him to make a voice changer device. To be precise, it was still in the planning stages, since it required some time to complete. However, Getting non-prescription eyeglasses was quick, so Kudo Shinichi could finally go outside. Japan was small, and Tokyo was even smaller, so the probability of running into someone who knew him from childhood was high. Without a disguise, he really didn't dare go out. Once the disguise equipment was ready, Kudo Shinichi was able to go outside again. One day, he even went with Komaeda Nagito, who had just finished school, to a restaurant for dinner. After ordering, Kudo Shinichi instinctively scanned the restaurant, analyzing the professions of the patrons in his mind, a detective's habit. Suddenly, his gaze froze, and his movements became stiff. Komaeda Nagito asked curiously, "Kudo-kun?" "No." Kudo Shinichi whispered, "Senpai, don't call me by my name, Rang is here." "Ah." Komaeda Nagito restrained the urge to turn around, sighing, honestly, telling her the truth wouldn't be a big deal, right? She doesn't seem like someone who would go around talking about it. Kudo Shinichi shook his head. "I don't want to worry, Rang." "Alright." Komaeda Nagito stopped trying to persuade him, "But if I can't call you Kudo-kun, what should I call you?" That was a good question. The waiter came to pour their drinks, and both of them fell silent. Suddenly, Komaeda Nagito's newly bought phone emitted a loud noise, startling the waiter, who accidentally spilled the water onto the table. "Ah, sorry." The waiter quickly grabbed a cloth to clean up. Komaeda Nagito awkwardly picked up his phone to mute it. "It's alright, my phone scared you." "Sorry, it's new, and I haven't adjusted all the settings yet." "Ah, it seems I accidentally set an alarm without knowing it. Ha ha ha, how strange." As he spoke, Komaeda Nagito stood up. The water had spilled onto his pants. Since it would be strange to wipe his pants in public, he decided to go to the restroom to clean up. Kudo Shinichi helped the waiter dry the table, then sat back down, praying that the commotion hadn't attracted Rang's attention. A little while later, Komaeda Nagito returned, looking rather peculiar, as if he was both happy and conflicted. "Senpai?" Kudo Shinichi asked cautiously, "Did something happen?" Komaeda Nagito hesitated. How should I put this? There might be a dead body in the restroom." Kudo Shinichi. "Kudo-kun, do you want to go take a look?" Komaeda Nagito looked excited. "It might be a murder case. I'm really looking forward to seeing you solve a case in person." "Call the police first." "Ah. But if we call the police, they'll notify the owner to seal off the scene, right? With your current situation, you wouldn't be able to investigate the scene. Isn't that quite despairing?" Komaeda Nagito spoke with apparent concern for Kudo Shinichi, but every word made Kudo Shinichi's stomach churn. Kudo Shinichi sighed. "Alright, senpai, you call the police, and I'll go take a look." With that, Kudo Shinichi rushed to the restroom. Once Kudo Shinichi got to work, Komaeda Nagito calmly called the police and then notified the restaurant owner, as the police had requested. The restaurant owner, pale-faced, ran to the restroom, ignoring the young-looking Kudo Shinichi sneaking around, and confirmed the body in the stall. In the end, he could only comply with the police's request to seal the restaurant. This was clearly going to upset the customers, especially those who were about to leave but were told they couldn't because someone had died, causing some tempers to flare. "Are you accusing me of murder?" The waiter tried to calm the man down. "Please, sir, that's not what we mean at all." "Then why can't we leave? We have nothing to do with any murder. Besides, the killer might already be gone." Another customer also shouted, "We still have things to do. Who's responsible if we're delayed? Where are the police? Why aren't they here yet? They should be arriving any moment now." Originally, the customers were enjoying their meal, unaware they wouldn't be allowed to leave. Upon hearing the commotion, they also began to get nervous, and they all started questioning the waiter about what was happening. Before the situation got out of hand, the police finally arrived. Although everyone was very dissatisfied, the police's words still held some weight. The customers eventually reluctantly returned to their seats, waiting for the police investigation. The crime scene had been sealed off, and Kudo Shinichi had also been driven out. At this moment, he stood beside Komaeda Nagito, lost in thought. What's up, Kudo-kun? Komaeda Nagito asked, his eyes sparkling. Have you found the culprit? Shush. Kudo Shinichi said nervously. Rang is still around. Call me Edogawa. Komaeda Nagito smiled. Kudo. Ahem, Edogawa-kun really likes Ranpo-san, doesn't he? Kudo Shinichi blushed slightly. Is this really the time to talk about that? True. Alright, back to the matter at hand then. Has Edogawa-kun discovered anything? Komaeda Nagito looked at Kudo Shinichi with expectant eyes. Kudo Shinichi shook his head. I figured out the method, but I still can't determine the culprit. We'll probably have new findings after the police questioning. Komaeda Nagito nodded thoughtfully. At this moment, the police, who had finally quieted the scene, loudly asked, who was the first to discover the body. Komaeda Nagito stood up. That was me. The officer turned to look at him and suddenly fell silent. This caught the attention of Inspector Megure, who was still in the dining area talking to Mori Kogoro. When he noticed his subordinate's sudden silence, he curiously turned to look as well, and also fell silent. Mori Kogoro, confused, looked left and right. What's going on? It's nothing, Inspector Megure said with a complicated expression. It's just that this kid looks familiar. His subordinate, Takagi Wataru, also nodded in sympathy. Komaeda-kun, Takagi said with a subtle tone, we meet again. This kid had been a suspect so many times that even counting on both hands wasn't enough, not to mention other incidents. Why is he always at the crime scene? Is he cursed or something? Chapter 94 End.